I myself, I'm very fee sensitive. And what has been difficult for either investors to invest in another fund or for new investors to come into the fund is this uncertainty of how much the fees are, right?
Hey, welcome back to the Angels, Exits, and Acquisitions podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Barnes. And today I'm joined with Michelle Urben from the Synergos Fund. And we just had a great conversation about conscious capitalism, impact investing. How do we bridge the gap from VC and venture investing to getting returns a little bit earlier and sooner than the long 10, 15-year cycle that it might take when you do venture investing? And then what VC firms and venture capitalists should be looking for when it comes to how do you keep your investors or your LPs happy as far as investing in these early stage companies, especially when you're talking about maybe making concessions, whether it comes to impact versus returns and why you don't have to do that. So stick around. As always, like, comment, and share, and we'll see you on the next one. Take care.
Welcome to Angels, Exits, and Acquisitions, the place to learn how to fund, scale, exit, and massively profit as an angel investor or entrepreneur. Brought to you by the Angel Investors Network. And now, here's your host, Jeff Barnes.
Welcome back to another episode of Angels, Exits, and Acquisitions. I'm your host, Jeff Barnes, and today I'm joined with Michelle Urben. Michelle, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Great to meet you, Jeff. Thanks for having me today.
Same here. I'm really excited about this, excited about learning about how you guys do things different when it comes to whether it's VC investing or just fund management and so on at Synergos. So before we dive into everything that you do today, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and how you got to where you are right now?
Sure. It's been a 30 plus years journey to get to the Synergos Fund as its manager.
I won't tell anyone.
And general partner. But it is a non-traditional path, I would say. I have always been in the asset and wealth management industries. So in terms of the requirements of investors, I'm quite attuned to what they need. But throughout the years, the problem or the challenge that I've been trying to advocate a solution for is allowing for a broader group of investors to access impactful venture companies. So all of that to say that my conclusion has been that we need to provide access to all, I'd say, capital funding rounds of venture funds so that those that are more limited in liquidity or timing or need faster exit can invest in impactful companies while being able to access a distribution and call it a 3 to 4 year time. So I invested in a nuclear company called Curio about 20 months ago. And this particular company is in the business of recycling the spent nuclear fuel of the United States. There's over 90,000 metric tons of it. Being Filipino-American, on the American side, I recognize the need of baseload power. As you know, data centers come up often, needing additional electricity. And then on the Philippine side, we just don't have enough electricity. And in fact, the Philippines signed its nuclear US 123 agreement with the US, therefore opening kind of this big interest in providing non-coal energy sources. So the seed round of Curio was open, and that's how I got to know my fellow GPs, Rabbi and Yehuda Moskowitz. We are the 3 GPs of the Synergos Fund, and we've been emulating the strategy that they were implementing in their fund, in their family office rather, into the Synergos Fund. I can talk a lot about my path here, but I think what's important is we want to be able to invest in impactful companies. I personally want to be able to invest in an impactful way. We talk a lot about conscious capitalism. I think we have a formula for that here today that works. We talk about liquidity. We address liquidity issues. We address fee issues within this fund. It is a very different venture fund. Would love to go through those details, but I'm pretty straightforward. We like energy, we like food, we like health. We want to strengthen our U.S. supply chains so that we can deliver solutions globally to our allies.
Well, I like that. And so you probably didn't know this about me, but I actually was on a nuclear powered submarine a long, long time ago. I was a mechanic in the engine room, and I actually worked on the power plant. I've sat on top of a nuclear reactor, and I've been underneath one. So, you know, I know exactly what you're talking about. I think Post
Yes,
Falls, Idaho, if
it's
I'm not mistaken,
wonderful.
has quite a bit. so,
Yeah,
so there's definitely, yeah.
there was recent news that really brings to gosh a pivotal moment, another milestone reached for that nuclear company Curio. Yesterday, we announced that Curio has completed its lab scale testing of the recycling of the spent nuclear fuel. End of the day, we need to supply our fuel sources, and why not? We have this valuable asset that we can process into nuclear fuel for all reactors, right? Not just our own patented designs, but for all of our nuclear fleet in the U.S. But yeah, oh my gosh, we have a lot to talk about on nuclear. That I think that's a whole hour, and I can go on
Oh,
and on.
absolutely. Absolutely.
It's
Well, the
very
funny thing is when I got out of the Navy, I said, all right, there's only three things that I'm not going to do. I don't know what I'm going to do yet, but there's three things I'm not going to do. One is I'm not going to work in nuclear power. I was like, there's just way too much red tape. It was just so time consuming and challenging to get the work done that I wanted to do. And I heard horror stories about working in power plants in the civilian world. The second was I was not going to do shift work. So that took out power plants altogether. And the third
yes,
was I'm not going to go into a cubicle. So, I ended up in a job where we insured nuclear power plants. We insured a lot of the nuclear facilities throughout the world, actually, not just the United States, but insured them, inspected them. The Hanover plant here, I'm in Washington State, so
yes,
Hanover in the Tri-Cities region. The big domes down in San Onofre in California,
So
things like
you
that.
must know
So
all of our international uh, colleagues or our peers, right? Or
probably not all of
yeah.
them, but we're deep in that world. Yep,
Okay.
between
Well, we'd
that
love
and
to have
ASME
you.
and everything else.
We'd love to have you whenever you're in Washington, D.C. Come visit us. We're right at the heart of the district. We're on K Street near the White House. So we'd love to have you.
Oh, beautiful. So you guys must do some lobbying then too, huh?
Well, it is true that to be successful in nuclear, the engagement with the Department of Energy, with the with policymakers is quite critical, and I think we've seen that in the prior administration, and this administration actually issued executive orders some months ago specific to the recycling of rather that also indicated and specified language around recycling of the spent nuclear fuel.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, let's talk a little bit about Synergos and your guys' thesis here, because I feel like you and I have a very similar idea when it comes to this. I've been helping a number of companies over the last 15, 20 years raising capital. I've been raising capital myself. And the challenge that we always find, and people come to us and say, hey, you must have this huge database of investors, and why can't people just write a check? Well, yeah, we do. We have a lot of investors. Challenge is the average person who invests in a new venture, a startup of any kind, one time to maybe three times, right? And the reason why is what you just hinted at. They have to wait anywhere from 5 years to 7 to the average I hear nowadays is roughly 15 years to a liquidity event for early stage companies. And that's a long, long time for a lot of people to wait. And most people are looking at it. I was actually just talking on another call with a gentleman. Most people like to look at their Fidelity, their Vanguard account, their Charles Schwab account. They can see the balance every single day, and they can see it
Sure.
going up and maybe going down every now and then. But with a venture, it's like, I put in my 100K, I put in my 250K, and now what? Right. And so we've been looking at this and saying, well, how is it that, we haven't solved this problem yet where you can get some sort of cash flow and get the upside potential as well? So it sounds like that's something very similar to what you guys are working on. So I'd love to hear how you guys are tackling that.
I mean, I love the alignment already, Jeff. We have coined a name for our fund. We are an evergreen hybrid. We're a hybrid evergreen fund. We say evergreen only to say that we are continually raising. We don't have built-in withdrawals for the investors. but we incorporate this by ensuring that we invest in, seed stage, growth stage, and commercializing stage slash late stage, right? So the term we've coined is a continuum fund. We're in the process of having this trademarked. We're waiting to make sure that it's in place. But why do startups or why do these key companies fail, right? It's because the follow-on rounds are not necessarily supported, right? We need to support our founders and their companies through through their journey, right? The fund is still for accredited investors. It still doesn't meet my personal goals of making sure we lower the bar with risk guidance, right? But to simplify, we will put a third in seed stage. The nuclear company and our waste to energy portfolio companies fall under that space. We would then also invest in scaling companies, and then we would invest in late stage, right? In commercializing companies. So if you take that, let's take your 100,000 example. Let's bring it to that level. A very tenor or term sensitive investor, right? Let's say he wants his return. He's only been investing in late stage. It's what he likes. It's the risk managed shorter time frame. So we put some in commercializing. We put a third, right? So in 2 to 3 years, we will nurture those companies to an exit. And I'll come back to the exit because we actually don't invest necessarily with an eye to an exit or quick exits, right? And that's the whole other part of the mission, which is conscious capitalism. But just on the liquidity piece, if I can give an investor or return his initial capital in 2 to 3 years, so even just a 2x return on that late stage portion, that's already 60,000 call in 3 years. Right? And then you have the scaling piece. Maybe that's returned, between 3 to 5 years. So this particular investor, this type of investor, is now more than willing and very appreciative, and actually more than ever able to embrace investing in these companies that take longer to nurture into these durable solution. Think of GE, think of all of these large firms that continue to be with us because they have solved or deliver critical solutions, right? So no longer are our LPs, and our LPs actually are with us because they've been disenchanted about this 10-year, this 10 plus 1 plus 1 waiting, right? Here we have a very defined cohort of portfolio companies, right? We have the first set of 5 companies that we will keep raising for to make sure that we can support them for the life of their companies, right? So again, having this late stage addresses these types of investors. And then for those that are quite more experience in investing in deep tech, right? And understand the runway, they're just pleased, right? Because they're going to see a return on their monies much sooner than they have for their other fund investment or their other direct investments in deep tech. So it's this continuum fund approach, I think, is very helpful. There are also other pain points that we've addressed for our investors. Fees. I'm very fee sensitive. And what has been difficult for either investors to invest in another fund or for new investors to come into the fund is this uncertainty of how much the fees are, right? So we've addressed the liquidity issue, the timing of these distributions, dividends, right? So we'll be able to provide a clip. But the fee is an issue for them too. So what we've done is we have a standard 2 and 20%, 2% management fee annually, 20% on the carry. But that 2% is it. We don't have any other custodial administrator fees that we tack on. We cover all of that within the 2%, right? So which is why we want to get quickly to the 250 million, the 500 million stage, so that all of our fees are covered, all of the fund operational fees are covered, and that way we can also start growing the team. So we've addressed that fee issue. And then another layer of the fee issue, Jeff, that you might have seen is that people don't like paying fees. Not only are they fee sensitive, but they don't like paying fees. So what we've done, and it's not core to the portfolio, but it is an option that we provide for investors, is we can allocate 10% of your investment, up to 10%, I should say, into fixed income generating investments to help defray these or cover these management fees. So the fund itself is very flexible. Our legal counsel has worked on this. This is a well-vetted structure, and I think it is new. There are components that are understood, but we love having these conversations with investors because we provide that flexibility, the optionality for us to adapt to their investor risk and overall profile of wealth management for them.
Before continuing, please subscribe and share this video to help us reach more people and stay notified of our latest releases. Now, let's continue watching and learning.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and a lot of people, that last point there is, most people don't even think of venture investing, angel investing as part of a portfolio, right? And a lot of it is because, well, I have no idea. I've heard it's super risky. It's never going to work out. I'm going to lose all my money and so on. But if they do, that's why they like to go into a fund, right? At least it diversifies their risk a little bit. And you guys are added in that other layer, which is 10% can go into some sort of fixed income, something or other, that allows you guys to possibly pay out, like I say, either cover the fees, cover the cost of managing the fund, or give them some sort of return along the way. So can you highlight or maybe talk to, like, there's rules and regulations around VC funds in general, right? And unless you live in Silicon Valley or you're really adept at angel investing, venture investing, the VC world, you might think it's like completely off limits, but we know that people can invest in that. But what can they expect? Like if somebody were to say, I'm going to go with, Andreessen Horowitz is a bad example because they're so huge, right? But another micro VC fund that's getting going versus you guys.
Sure.
There's a big difference between everything's venture versus what you guys are talking about. And what are the limitations that you guys have to stick within? Like you can't just say we're going to be doing private equity now, right? Or you can't just say we're going to take everything and become a hedge fund. They're very different regulations. So what's the difference there between you guys and them? I think you hit on that a little bit, but what are the limitations that you guys have to fall within still?
In terms, again, this is a private placement fund, so we can essentially allocate as the GPs agree, right? What makes it easy for investors to understand our fund is that we are investing in the foundational types of companies, right? So it's energy, it's food, it's health. As long as they're accredited investors, they can access the fund, right? So we don't fall afoul of any regulations. I think the difference is really around transparency. We use a very powerful tool. We use Hatcher Plus. I don't know if you've come across them, Jeff, but essentially each of our LPs can track their portfolio real time on Hatcher Plus. Because we are obviously, when we deploy, you have to have a certain level of capital to invest in these companies. But it is first come, first serve, right? As long as there's allocation and you come in, we'll give you access to Curio, Gate 5, Agrology, OptiHarvest, right? But we also allow for investors on a risk level, right? After the minimum has been met, right, they can actually increase allocation to either specific companies or the baskets, right? So our categories are incubating, scaling, and commercializing. So from a risk management perspective, the more sophisticated ones, they know exactly where they're overexposed, where they can't gain any more exposure. They can just link up to their Hatcher Plus portfolio. So they always have, all of our investors always have a holistic view of their overall portfolio, not just ours, because it's just, what do you call this? It's just it's a report. It's reporting, and they have access to this. This is something that I think um, has been this friction between investors and venture funds and GPs is this lack of transparency. And venture has been about protecting your IP, right? But for us, the more our investors understand our companies, the more they don't need to search for it themselves, right? Because many of our investors are family offices that are through the years have done this vetting due diligence themselves, right? But here, in a very accessible way with the Synergos Fund, they can gain access to companies that, yes, we still are focused on investing in the US, but these are technologies that can be commercialized in Central America, in Southeast Asia, even in the Nordics, right? So there's a lot of interested investors in this approach. And again, the regulatory aspects of it, we follow accredited investor requirements.
Sure. Well, what I was getting at was, the ability for you guys to invest in something other than venture, right?
Because it's
Like
not
that's
core. It's not core, right?
Mhm.
It's less than 10%, but it is allowable.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. That's very unique. It's very different than, because I remember, if I'm not mistaken, Sequoia had to change the way they were set up, and I may be misunderstanding or remembering incorrectly. But they literally said, "Listen, we have so much money. We'd like to do something other than just venture investing and not be just a VC firm, right?" And so they had to go through a lot of hoops to be able to do that. And what you guys are saying is, listen, we're still following the rules of being a VC fund, so you can get all the benefits of that. But we still have an allocation. We can put a small percentage over here to try and help offset some of the other costs and
And again,
risks.
it's not core to the strategy. It's
Right.
just a way for us to broaden the investor base for the fund.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I love that. Now, something you guys said that is, again, very germane to what I'm trying to help with and fix and solve in some capacity is the idea of follow-on rounds. And most investors, and what I found is that some investor or some capital raisers are good at raising money from friends and family. Some are good at raising from angel investors. Some are good at institutional and family offices, but not too many of them are good across all of them, right? And the fact is that at each stage of development, there's maybe even a larger need for capital, which changes the investor profile that you're going after. Like, you start out, you're going to your mom and dad and your aunts and uncles, and then you're maybe going to some angel groups and you're talking to them. And then eventually you make this shift over to like VCs and potentially family offices and maybe private equity and corporate. And they're all very unique and different investor profiles with all very different check sizes. And most VC funds say, here's my box, and we fit a check size, and only in this area, they've got to be at this stage of development, and we're only going to do this check size, whether it's 5 million or 500 million, right? That's a very wide range, but they will stick within their box, and they might do follow-on rounds if it still fits in that box. But a lot of VC funds will not go outside of that. And what you guys are saying is, we want to support our founders and our issuers at each of these. Like, if we invested that seed stage, or maybe not seed, but the early stage, you want to stick with them, if I'm understanding correctly, all the way through that late stage in commercialization, because you know that, well, let's face it, you need a different additional capital to get to certain stages of development, especially when you're talking about things like you're talking about energy and data centers and nuclear and things like that. Like, that's not a very
The
simple
banks will
sales
come in.
process.
The banks will come in at some point, right? Again, I think this
Yeah.
is why we are quite different, because we don't come in with that traditional viewpoint. For us, whoever is interested in joining our journey, they're very, very welcome. And I think because we have such differentiated companies in our portfolio, that they're willing to meet that that minimum bar of $1 million, right? Because after $1 million, which is what we want to be able to allocate to all the five in the portfolio, right? They can ramp up or increase their exposure to certain things, right? Some people will not want nuclear energy, or energy in general, right? But they're willing to, because these are companies that are doing good, but they actually want more exposure to our agricultural agri-tech plays. They meet the minimum and then they put another 2 to 3 million in the specific category that is scaling, and could be agri-tech, could be mining and manufacturing. So yeah, I know what those boxes are, and I think as long as we have the ability to have that conversation, the fund itself can flex to those investment policies, right? And I think that's the power of what we built with this hybrid continuum fund.
No, I like it. I really like it.
And the bets will come in, right? I mean, for our late stage, we don't. That's pretty much, the returns are already. It already reflects that other funders have come in, right? So but we really, really care about these impactful companies, right? And then in 6 to 7 years, you're going to see a Curio or a Gate 5 be that late stage company, and you know what? Our clients, we hope, would be at that 400x return, right? And then our hope is that as we deliver these distributions, that the clients will increase or add to their capital commitments. In fact, the way we've structured our subscription documents, Jeff, it is so easy. It's one book. Our clients can just sign one page, or tell us every quarter we want to add another 100,000 here, another 200,000 here. So we're building that relationship. And I think, yes, we start with families and friends, but we've also been fortunate with other institutions. We are in conversations with sovereign wealth funds. We all need to come together to solve these foundational issues, persistent challenges, right? So we're again, it's, I'd love for you to take a look at, under the hood of everything that we've built. It's so simplified. For us to take on a client, it's 1 to 2 calls and then we place, right? Obviously for institutions, we have to follow their due diligence process, 3 to 6 months. But you know what? We're an Evergreen fund. We're happy to spend that 6 months with you because other projects will come along anyway, right? So very, very excited about how we're positioning ourselves. And we hope that we're not going to be the only ones, right?
Well, so I had John Mackey as one of our judges at our events a long time ago, and John, wrote the book Conscious Capitalism, and I know that's a big focus of what you guys are talking about is these impactful investments in companies. And I have to say that over the last several years of doing this, we're seeing a shift to more people doing that. So I'm happy to hear that you guys are in this field and focusing on impact investments and conscious capitalism and things that are going to make being a human and living on this planet better for a long time, right? Let's face it, the AI revolution, everything that's happening is impacting the data centers, impacting the energy production. And of course, if we do that wrong, we don't want to go back to the 1800s types of coal manufacturing. There's different, better ways to produce energy that we need, right?
I mean, for one of our companies, Agrology, right? Like AI is so powerful, right? The data that's processed and captures just allow for us to deliver information to farmers for precision farming, for better farming methodologies, right? But yeah, it's an interesting journey. We are differentiated. The conscious capitalism, I mean, we're not out for a quick exit. We're also non-concessionary, right? Because I think that's a challenge, right? We are reaching out to catalytic capital providers, and they're shocked because we don't talk about concessionary investments, right? We want to deliver above average returns. We want to deliver excellent returns to them. And I think we're already in the path of proving ourselves. Again, the cohort, the first five, we have a 2-pager that I will share with you, Jeff, because these companies, we don't necessarily need new technology, right? We just
Right.
want to continue supporting impactful companies.
Absolutely. No, I love that. So, all right, Michelle, we're nearing the end of our time here. But before I let you go, I have one last question I need to ask you. And that is, now that you made this 30 plus year journey in this world and developing this fund and running this fund and managing and having the opportunity to be involved in this, if you can go back in time to the very beginning of your career and you could give yourself one piece of advice, what would that be?
Study law.
Study law? I got to be honest, that's the first time I've heard that. But I was just telling a client today, I was like, the part that I like the least about my job is having to go through and review all the legal documents and sit on the phone with the lawyers a lot. And when you're talking about some of these companies, it's like you have an entire boardroom full of attorneys. And we actually have had boardrooms with attorneys. It's like, oh my gosh, it's a lot of work. But yeah, you got to do it, right? You got to understand this stuff.
You have to understand it, and negotiations, right? Because we have to work with founders. We're always at the negotiating table. And I think negotiation skills come very naturally at for lawyers who have had to argue
I was
for.
going to say, yeah, my son is 13 years old. And I remember when he was about 4 or 5 years old, thinking this kid's going to be a lawyer because he was so good at negotiating a win for him, right? It's like, I'll trade you this little, Hot Wheels car for your entire meal, brother. Whatever it was. And he was so good at it. And now he's 13. He's doing the same thing just in a different way. He's always trying to negotiate. So, Dad, that I love you, right? It's like, oh my gosh, this kid. So yeah, I hear you loud and clear. You mean negotiations, law, all of it.
And our kids are different from when you and I were growing up, right? My daughter loves Lego, so it's still these toys that are, through the decades people play with Lego. But my business partners and the founders of Curio, I always tell them this story. I repeat it all the time because I didn't realize how much my almost 7-year-old in the past 2 years has been listening to all my Zooms, all my podcasts, all my meetings, all my phone calls. Her Lego set, she put like this barrel standing up, and then she put things around it and people around it in her little Lego town that she built. And she said, that's the Curio reactor.
That's very cool.
Powered up her town. She powered up her town, her city, with a nuclear reactor. So I'm like,
that's awesome.
It is.
That's so cool.
And honestly, you have a 13-year-old, and all of us, many companies just have them visit our offices, get to see the technologies we're investing in, get to meet the people.
Very cool.
We were at here in the district. I'm a founding board member of the DC Tech and Venture Coalition. And, we always have these gatherings, these funders and founders. And I'm like, you know what? One of these days, let's have the founders bring their families as they pitch to us, right? Because we need their talent in the future to support the technologies and the industries we're building. But anyway, I'm so happy to hear you have a almost lawyer son. Lawyers make great venture capitalists.
I think he might like that because he also likes money. So it could be a really good fit. Absolutely.
Good combination.
So Michelle, I really appreciate having you on the podcast today. Do us a favor. How can people find you, reach out to you, learn more about you and Synergos?
I think start with connecting with us on our LinkedIn. We have the Synergos Fund. We do selectively share information on what we're doing. Reach out there, and one of the team will get back to those interested in learning more about us. And obviously, if folks are in the Washington, D.C. area, please drop me a line. Happy to have a coffee and talk about what we do.
Beautiful. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for being here, Michelle. And for those of you that are watching, listening, make sure you like, subscribe, and share. And if you have any comments, go ahead and put them in the comments box and we'll go ahead and get back to you. So thanks so much for watching and listening to the Angels, Exits, and Acquisitions podcast with Jeff Barnes and Michelle Urben. Michelle, again, thank you so much. Take care.